How you guys doing? So apparently the timer's on, so let's get started. Some bookkeeping that apparently I need to remind everybody. If your phone makes any noise, you need to shoot it. So I don't want to kill any phones today, but apparently that's what's going to happen. There's snipers somewhere. They'll take care of your phones. The other thing was don't forget your valuations. Super important. Feel free to be brutally honest. That's the Blizzard way. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. It's called Against the Burning Hells, Diablo 3 Redemption with Reaper of Souls. So really going to talk to you guys. This is going to be a very candid, sort of behind-the-scenes look at all the craziness that we as a Diablo team went through from launch all the way until Reaper of Souls. First, a little bit about myself. I'm Joshua Mosqueira. I'm the game director for Reaper of Souls. And if you're trying to place my accent, I'll give you a little help. There's a little bit of English, obviously. There's a little bit of Spanish, some French, but it's mostly mumbling. So I'm sorry about that, but I'll give you the transcript of the talk afterwards. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're really going to talk about how we as a team took this journey from Diablo 3 when it shipped in 2012, and all the permutations, the evolution, our thinking, how it changed to result in Reaper of Souls and the Ultimate Evil Edition. It's been a crazy journey, and it's really awesome to be here to be able to share it with you guys. But first, I have two disclaimers that I think is really important for us to sort of get together on the same page. The first one, I know it might be easy for you guys to think just because I'm up here talking and because I was the game director that I was solely responsible for these changes. That could not be further from the truth. If you played any Blizzard game and seen our credits, you will see that the very first credit is game design by Blizzard Entertainment. Everybody at the studio had a role to play. First of all, our team. We fought hard. We had a lot of passion. We knew what we needed to do. The other teams at Blizzard were brutal with their feedback, but they were also really supportive in helping us make this transformation. All the way up to the leadership of the company, everybody understood what was at stake. And more importantly, our players were part of the ride. We listened a lot to the feedback, and it was really important for us to adjust and adapt to what they were saying. So really, if I'm standing here today, it's because I'm literally standing on the shoulders of giants. So I feel really privileged to be able to be here today. The second caveat that I need to get out there is that contrary to popular beliefs, we do have dates and milestones at Blizzard. Yeah, it's true. So you might think, of course you can make these kind of sweeping changes to your game because you can take forever. That's not true. In fact, Reaper of Souls was supposed to launch in November of 2013. Myself and John Haidt, who was a production director, we had to go all the way up to Mike Morheim, and we said, Mike, we need more time to get this right. And everybody understood what was at stake. We knew that we hadn't quite hit our goals with Diablo 3, and Reapers was our chance to right the ship and get everybody re-engaged with this awesome franchise, because Diablo 3 was a phenomenal game. Now, the thing that Blizzard will do is they will say, if you guys need more time and we believe in it, let's do it. So we got a couple more months that really made all the difference. That's where Adventure Mode really sort of came together. So again, I was part of a team, and that team was really important, and we were given the right support at Blizzard. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I actually want to start where Diablo 3 is right now, today. On the eve, we're about to launch patch 2.2. We're really excited. But I think it's important for you guys to really understand the scope of this journey, that you understand where we ended up. So where is Diablo? Well, one of the things that happened when I took over as game director 2 years ago, one of the things that we felt was really important as a team was to try to understand, to really get to the roots of what a Diablo game was all about. Now, Jay Wilson, who was the original game director, had an awesome GDC talk about the 7 pillars that really defined and informed Diablo 3. But one of the things that we felt we needed to do as a team, and something that we say at Blizzard all the time, is we needed to concentrate the coolness. So we took those 7 pillars and we thought long and hard as a team and tried to reduce it to what we feel are the 3 fundamental aspects of not just Reaper of Souls, but of any Diablo game. And these are, the first one is, you really need to focus on the fantasy. And for Diablo, that means playing epic, bigger-than-life heroes fighting the forces of hell. And again, Reaper of Souls did a great job here of pairing the Crusader, this battle-hardened warrior of a tank, against the only other villain in the Diablo universe that could possibly rival Diablo in terms of coolness, and that is Malthael, the fallen angel of death. But Diablo's not just about great heroes and these great villains in the dark Gothic setting, which is something that was really important for us to recapture. At the end of the day, the reason people keep playing our game is because of the promise of epic loot. And this is where Loot 2.0, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, this is really where it came from. This is our thing. We really needed to get this right. The second pillar that really informed a lot of our thinking was we wanted an end game for everyone. Whether you played an hour, 10 hours, 100 hours, 1,000 hours of Diablo 3, we wanted to make sure there was something for you to do, something for you to kill, some awesome loot to get. And out of this pillar, adventure mode came out of. So the ultimate expression of go anywhere, slay anything. And the final pillar for us, because we fundamentally feel that Diablo plays best when you're playing with other people, which is why on console, that same screen, same couch experience is so important. But the final pillar was to make online matter, right? Again, we really feel that when you're connected with your friends, you're having fun together, the magic of Diablo bubbles up to the surface. So in this front, we added clans, we added communities, we added a bunch of co-op buffs that really encourage players to play together. So that's where Diablo 3 is right now. The team, as we're working on the next patches, we always ask ourselves, what is a fantasy? Why are players going to be excited about playing this? How do we make sure there's something for everyone? And how do we really celebrate that social experience? So that's where we are now. How do we get here? Why do we have to make all these changes? Why do we need to pivot so much? And I think to do that, I now want to go back in time and go back to the year leading up to Diablo 3 shipping. So I joined the team in May of 2011. I was there for the last year, and it was a really awesome time to be part of the team, because there were members of that team dating back all the way to Blizzard North who had been working on this game for over 10 years. They had poured 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, and they could finally see the end in sight. Even myself, I'd only been there a couple of weeks, I was really excited. I could tell that something special was going to happen. But I could also see, again, as an outsider coming into this great team, that the specter of Diablo 2 loomed large over the team. The pressure of trying to live up to the legacy of this incredible game weighed heavily on the team and impacted so many of the decisions. But launch day gets coming closer. The team's excited. We're wrapping up the last iteration of the skill system, which was number 85. It was crazy. But everybody is looking forward to this game, not just inside the Blizzard hallways, but around the world. You know, it's like it's finally, after 10+ years of waiting, there's a new Diablo coming out, and everybody is excited. Even on Google, we were the number 5 ranked search for that year, which is pretty awesome. So launch day comes, right? And it's really a global celebration for us. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of members of our team spent over 10 years working on this game. We had incredible launch events around the world. People were lining up. They could not wait to play the game. They had been waiting for this for so long. We, as a team, had been waiting for this moment for so long. And even in Irvine, we had this great outdoor event. And one of the things the team did leading up to this is for the last year, everybody was growing out these amazing, crazy beards. And everybody shaved their beards off on stage. And it was really this epic moment. It was finally launching. But it was going to turn out to be a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story, right? On the one hand, the sales are out of this world. I mean, the sales team had projected 6.66 million units in the first year. Yeah, I know, even our sales guys love Diablo, right? We got that in the first couple of days. Like we didn't know what to think. It was mind-boggling, right? The reviewers liked it. I mean, for a Blizzard game, those are actually really awesome reviews, right? So things were good, right? No. This is the ugly side of it. This is the one that really hurt. It really stung. And I know I can see it from your perspective. Like, come on, Blizzard. Like, you knew it was a number 5 search on Google. You knew people were going to show up and play. Well, even what we thought was the most outlandish estimates for day one ended up being massively conservative in reality. And it hurt. People have been waiting for 10 years to play this game, and the worst fear of an always online game is not getting to play, and that is exactly what happened, and the internet did its thing. You notice I'm still not quite laughing, because the wounds are still really, really, really strong. But I would say all those hard lessons we learned because of error 37, there I said it, I can say it now, good. We put them into practice, and with Reaper of Souls, we had the smoothest launch in Blizzard history. People were waiting on the front end screen, waiting to press play. 12:01 came around, and they were into Act 5 without a hitch, right? So we learned. But the damage had been done. This game that people were waiting for 10+ years didn't live up to their expectations. And the sales didn't matter. The review scores didn't matter. What mattered most to us was a player sentiment. We had let them down. And let me tell you, that felt shitty. The entire team felt the weight of that responsibility. So why were people upset? Okay, I think error 37 kind of gave us one black eye. But I think in retrospect, a lot of decisions leading up to D3, again, you've heard the expression, the road to hell is paved with good intention. I think every single decision leading up to D3, in the moment, felt like it was the right one. The team was passionate about it. We're making it. But at the end of the day, we made some mistakes. I think one of the first ones we made was that we stuck almost dogmatically to the structure of D2. In other words, we assumed that it was going to be okay for players to play the same game over and over and over again, getting increasingly more difficult, right? The thing that's ended up happening is that players ended up hitting a brick wall of difficulty, but the game was just funneling them into increasingly more difficult scenarios. And on the story side, no matter how awesome your story is, the 100th time, spoilers, sorry, but it's been over 3 years, you see Cain die, you realize that he's being killed by butterflies, and you're going, what the hell, right? Because no matter how great your story is, if you see the same thing 100 times over and over again, it loses its meaning. So the game was hard. Again, the internet, great source of honest feedback and criticism. Yeah, the most heroic thing to do was to be the demon hunter and run away from your enemies. And this really highlighted another problem we had. Because the game was so hard, instead of being these epic heroes fighting the forces of darkness, you were barbarian smashing pots. That's right. The best heroes in Sanctuary were fighting terracotta, because it was more efficient and less difficult than actually fighting monsters. That's not what Diablo is about, right? Diablo is about killing demons and slaying Diablo himself. And when they weren't smashing pots, they were trying to optimize and find out the most effective combinations of quest steps to get the best loot. So there were cases where players would see this screen more often than the actual game, more often than the actual pots they were farming, because it was more efficient just to jump into the game, kill the thing you were going for, and then jumping back out. And then when they were getting the loot, right, you would see a bag full of yellows or a bag full of legendaries, and you would know, as you clicked on every single one, that you weren't going to get an upgrade. And a true story, On my live character, my awesome barbarian, it took me 104 hours before I found my first legendary. And you know what it was? A quiver. If you haven't played Diablo, barbarians smash things. They don't need a quiver full of arrows. So something was wrong there. And I remember that moment. And remember that moment, said, like, what happened? But that wasn't the end of it. So when you weren't getting the items in game, where did we send you? To the medieval version of eBay. Because that's what heroic heroes do, right? When you can't get the item from the pot you're farming, you go to the auction house. Now, the auction house was this great experiment. We had the best of intentions for it. But fundamentally, it ended up short-circuiting the core reward loop of the game. So what should have been this moment of celebration, this moment of victory, ended up being the lowest moment for the team. Because we knew collectively that even though we had all the best of intentions, that we had let ourselves down, we had let our teams down, and we had let our players down. But the really special thing about the Diablo team is that instead of fracturing, instead of getting all bickering and losing faith with one another, we rallied around and we told each other we can do this and we're going to do it. And that's exactly what we did. But to do that, we really need to understand where did we go wrong. Okay, we spent a lot of time, talking amongst ourselves, talking with the other game directors at Blizzard, talking to Jay to really understand what were some of our missteps. And we sort of summarized, we sort of made three key sort of philosophical errors. The first one was our whole sort of game design philosophy around launch. We misunderstood the player psychology. It's exactly like, why do players play an item-based game, and what do they want from it? And from a very practical perspective, we had the wrong type of beta test. So the first one, let's just talk about items. So I remember joining the team and hearing the designers get really excited because they had set themselves a goal to live up to the legacy of Diablo 2, which meant that people 10 years from now should still be able to play Diablo 3 and still find items they had never found before. What I think as a team we forgot or lost sight of was that the Diablo 2 that people remember was the Diablo 2 after years of patching after an expansion pack. The team really believed and worked hard and poured a lot of passion thinking they could get it right on the first go. And what this resulted in was this really long-term item curve that, while the intention was to make sure you still found something 10 years from now, the reality was that it was too stingy. Players were not getting drops. And that's why people love playing Diablo. The other thing we thought was that people wanted a hard, a challenging, a brutal game. And in truth, what they want is they want a game that's fun, that challenges them, but ultimately is about trying to be as efficient and as quick as possible in slaying all the things. I mean, I even remember we did a promotional video right before launch. We had our best players on the team talking about how hard it was and how Inferno was just going to, kill everybody. And we didn't realize just how bad this experience was going to be because of our stingy item curve. One of the other things was this notion of, well, what if sometimes you will find a magic item, so a blue item, what if it sometimes was better than a rare item or a yellow item, which should theoretically be more powerful? Wouldn't that moment of surprise be a really great moment for the player? Well, that just ended up being very confusing, and players didn't understand why an item that should have been of lesser power was actually better than an item that should have been of greater power. So there was confusion around this concept. And this is one that it took us a really long time to really come to grips with. We thought that because of the legacy of Diablo, that randomness is at the heart of that experience, right? That randomness is king. The truth is that today we understand that it's replayability that is the goal. Randomness is a tool that you can use to get replayability. But what ended up happening is that we ended up sacrificing fun at the altar of randomness because we thought randomness was important. An example here is what we call near misses. So this is a quiver that my barbarian found, or one of them like it. Again, barbarians don't need a quiver. The idea would be here that, oh, I got an item for another class. Oh, that's a near miss. That it could have been for me, but it's cool because whenever I get to roll a demon hunter, in other words, never, I'll be able to use this item, right? And we didn't understand that all they were doing to the players is not only did I not get a good drop, but you gave me a drop for a class that I'm not playing. You guys are mean, right? I think a better way of handling near misses are duplicates, right? Because that's actually a near miss. I got a different version of the same item. That means the next time I might get a better one because I can actually use it. The other thing is we thought, aren't loot fountains awesome, right? They just throw all the loot at the player, right? Because it's going to be so much fun to see this happen. Except when the reality is that you're seeing a bunch of junk. And don't get excited, those orange gloves, if they read as orange on those monitors, they may be legendary, but they're not for your class. So don't worry about that. So it was just, we were compounding issue upon issue. And one of the reasons we did this is, again, we misjudged player psychology. And I think one of the key things when designing an item-based game is you really need to sort of balance, or at least be aware of, the reason why players play your game at first, like what is that fantasy you're trying to sell to them, and then is how they actually play the game. And these two are very different. So the fantasy we want to sort of sell our players, that we want to deliver for our players is, you want to be this badass demon hunter. You want to dual-wield crossbows and slay all the demons of hell and get all the great loot, right? That's why you play, right? This is an aspirational character. She's a badass. I'm going to kill all the demons. So that's why we play. How we play is very different, especially in this day and age. You go to Google. You ask Google, what is the most efficient way to get gear? And you get over 500,000 responses, right? So instead of players sort of really exploring your game and getting to fall in love with your systems, they're shortcutting it right from the get-go. And this is something that D2, when it launched, didn't need to contend to as much as modern-day item-based games need to. Because not only is it a few keystrokes away, Twitch and YouTube are really sort of telling our players, it's not about the fantasy, it's about how you get those items. So, and again, one of the things that we sort of totally misjudged player psychology is, instead of playing the game because of the difficulty of the game, the stinginess of the loot, we were funneling them into a shop, into a store. Again, not very heroic. And then when they were actually playing the game, they were flip farming, right? They weren't actually engaging in the story. They weren't paying attention to the wonderful world details we added. They were just going in, going out. So that was terrible. And this is where things like the Al Kaiser run come up. This is the most efficient way to farm Diablo 3 when it shipped. And the final realization we made is that we really had the wrong type of beta. Now, I'm going to use a bunch of spoilers here. So for a game that was supposed to have item content for over 10 years, for a game that was going to have all these different classes, our beta consisted of the first 45 minutes of the game and up to level 12. There's no way we could have tested any of these systems in depth. Even though at Blizzard we did a lot of company alpha tests and we did all these things, there was no way we were going to get any real actionable feedback. And the reason we did this is because we felt that the spoilers of learning that Kane's going to die, that Leah is Diablo, were more important to protect, right, than making sure that our item-based game was properly balanced and rolled, right? So what we had was a demo, not a beta. And again, for Reaper Souls, we pivoted on this. We had a prolonged beta. We invited as many people as who wanted to join our game. And the only thing we kept for ourselves was the Malthael fight. And you know what happened? When we launched, sure enough, when you get hundreds of thousands of players playing a boss fight, they found a lot of bugs. So we had to fix it. So again, I think for a game, we all know the importance of betas, but it's incredible how even us, we made this mistake of focusing on the wrong type of beta. So what changed? Right? So we've been talking about, all the challenges the team faced launch. Very quickly in the summer of 2012, we knew that we needed to do things. We knew we needed to try to adjust. We knew we needed to try to get the ship back on its course. So we started patching the game. We started listening to a lot of feedback from our players, and the team poured a lot of passion, right, and a lot of energy to try to pivot the right way, to try to make the kind of changes that not just our community wanted from us, but that we wanted from us as well. The best thing about our team is we never gave up, because we knew we could solve this problem. And one of the things that helped us was perspective. And we really got a lot of that perspective from the console version. Now, when we started working on console, there were just 3 of us. It was myself, Norbert Zabel, who's our programmer, and Julia Humphreys, who's our producer. And I still remember to this day, my very first day at Blizzard, I'm sitting down with Jay Wilson, Ray Gresco, Rob Pardo, all these guys, and they're essentially giving us our marching orders. And it was very clear, they said, guys, we don't know if this is going to work, right? It's a test. It's a gamble. You guys are smart. Let's see if you guys can figure out if you guys can get a Diablo game on a console. But the only thing is that if it's going to work, it's got to be awesome. So whatever you need to change, change. Which is both incredibly exciting as a game designer, but ultimately terrifying. Here you are getting the keys to the kingdom in the car, and all you have to worry about is not wrecking it. So that was a little bit terrifying. But again, something we did from the start is we tried to really define what our pillars for the console version were. So we had 3 pillars. The first one was pick up and slay. We knew that for this to be a Diablo game, we knew we had to keep it fast, we had to keep it visceral, and we needed to stay true to the action RPG aspect that is Diablo. We knew we were going to have a challenge when it came to the user interface, but what we did not want to do was to simplify or dumb down the experience. What we wanted to do was streamline the experience so we kept the players in the action as much as possible. The second pillar that was really important for me was it was hand-built for the console. Now, quick shout-out. Who here played a Diablo game for the first time on console? Awesome. Thank you. Right? Because we knew that we were going to get a slew of new players who've heard about Diablo and never had a chance to play it, and now they're going to be able to play it from the comfort of their own couch with a controller in their hand. So we knew that we didn't want to make a port. In fact, port was a dirty word for us. Right? What we wanted to do is really deliver a handcrafted experience. And we changed so much about the game. The camera. Every single skill in the game has been tweaked so that it feels great and responsive on the controller. Right? We changed the way the difficulty system worked. So many things to really deliver a handcrafted console experience. But the most important pillar for us was the one that really expressed what was uniquely console about Diablo 3 on the PlayStation. And that is one couch to rule them all. We knew that if we could get 4 players sitting together on the same couch, having beers, playing on the same screen, that we would have a very console way of experiencing Diablo 3. So a lot of technical challenges we needed to overcome. But again, it was important for us because we, as I said before, playing together is the best way to play Diablo 3. So why did the console version of the game give us this fresh perspective? Well, because it allowed us to really challenge a lot of the assumptions that the core team had been operating under, sometimes by second nature, in terms of how you control a Diablo game, what loot means in a Diablo game, and fundamentally how a Diablo game looks. Like moving the camera closer on console was one of the holy wars we had to fight. And I didn't figure it was going to be, but it was surprising to see, you can't move the camera in a Diablo game. No, I think you can. So let's talk about controls. So I think it's pretty obvious that a controller is not a mouse and keyboard. And one of the fears I had going into this experiment was it really felt that even though I was really excited about the prospect, but it felt like I was committing, we as a team, we were committing one of the greatest heresies in gaming. We're going to take this beloved PC classic and put it on the dirty controller, right? The truth is, and again, this is a revelation we had as a team. Remember the very first day I'm sitting down there in what we call our living room simulator, sitting down with the controller in my hand for the first time. I load up the barbarian, and I'm walking, not pointing and clicking. I'm walking my barbarian down the road to New Tristram, and I come across the first zombie, and I press the X button, and I bash the zombie, and I see a skeleton flying across the screen. That was the first time in all my years of playing Diablo games that instead of feeling like Josh behind a computer clicking away like mad, I felt I was this guy. I really felt I was a badass hero. The intimate connection of direct control really highlighted the visceralness that I think is at the heart of a Diablo game. And what we learned here as a team, what we became very comfortable with, is that Diablo is not about how you control it. Diablo is about what you're doing. And what you're doing is slaying demons and getting loot. How you do that, it doesn't matter as long as it's fast and responsive. The other sort of perspective that console gave us resulted in adventure mode. Now, adventure mode is one of the things we added with Reaper of Souls, and nothing tells your community that you're radically changing your game by adding an entirely new way of playing the game. So where did this come from? Well, it actually had to start in the console version of the game in the way we handled the difficulty select screen. Now, at this point, on the PC side of things, they had introduced a system called Monster Power. Monster Power allowed you to sort of throttle the difficulty or the challenge of your game by selecting from 1 to 10 levels. And we were looking at it, and we thought, OK, that's great. We really like that system. But it's not very console-friendly. And in fact, what it really is, it's a difficulty select screen. So instead of burying it in a drop-down, why don't we bring it up forward, right? Make it one of the first decisions you make as you're loading up the game. And I think the console players are going to feel very comfortable for them. Now, this was a big challenge because, again, it wasn't in Diablo 3. It wasn't in Diablo 2. Why are we adding this level of difficulty? But again, we thought that it was so important for a hand-built experience that we needed to do this. Now, what this ended up rolling into is that it really started to change our thinking when it came to difficulty. Now, in Diablo 3 at launch, the difficulty of a monster was essentially hard-coded to the area and the overall difficulty of the game. So a skeleton in Act 1 on normal had this many hit points and this much damage. The same skeleton, in Act 1 in Inferno had more hit points and had more, did more damage. And this way, that's how we carefully control it, so the peaks and valleys of the difficulty we wanted. Well, one of the things we started experimenting with, well, what if the monsters leveled up with your character? Right? This will allow us to have more dynamic encounters. This will allow us to do things like adventure mode. But there was a fear that if you're leveling up your monsters alongside your player level, well, that's just going to result in a very sort of flat experiences. There's not going to be any peaks and valleys. Well, the things that we quickly found out is that actually our items were the right vector to give us those peaks and valleys. Because when you get an upgrade, you're going to be overpowered to the level of the monsters that drop that item. So naturally, you're going to get that cool peaks and valleys, that ebb and flow that you really wanted to. And then once we hit on that and we sort of really mastered our fear of having a very linear, very flat difficulty scheme, that's what resulted in us eventually saying, you know what would be very cool? If we allowed players, if we unlocked all the waypoints and allowed them to go anywhere and slay anything. And again, that change started with the way we changed difficulty on the console version. But I think the biggest change that the console version helped us make was what eventually became Loot 2.0. So what is Loot 2.0? Well, it's very simple. We knew that when we were working on the console version, there was no way that we could be dropping as many items as we were and still have players not spend the entire game in the inventory screen. So we decided we have to drop less items. So this is what a typical screenshot of what it looked like right after D3 launch of when you killed the butcher. Again, a whole lot of nothing, but a lot of it. Now, fast forward to Loot 2.0, and this is what happens when you kill a Rift Guardian. You're getting legendaries, you're getting crafting materials that you want, but more importantly, you're getting less of it, but the stuff you're getting is better. The other thing that we really wanted to do, right, and really started taking steps to the console version, but I think Reaper really nailed it, was we wanted to make sure that your items really changed the way you play the game. Essentially, we wanted the legendary affixes of those items to break the game and make you feel overpowered. And one of the things we fixed is we did away with the notion that sometimes a blue could be better than a yellow, and we did here the set items, the green items, which are the hardest items to find in the game, should be the most powerful items in the game. So where did this really come from the console standpoint? So here we're going to give you guys a very sort of brief example of the types of challenges we had as a team to really shift our philosophy. So this is a screenshot from a very early build in the summer of 2011. Again, I'd only been at Blizzard for a couple of months, playing a lot of D3, really getting a sense of what the game was about. I was playing a wizard at this point, and these two items drop. And I'm, for the moment, I think it's at the beginning of Act 2, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then I started looking at them and go, okay, one is 71% more damage to wizards. Cool, I'm a wizard. But the other one is 24% more damage overall, but 48% crit chance. Wait a minute, which one's better? I have the advantage of being right next door to the system designer, so I walk over and, hey guys, which one should I pick? I mean, which one's really better? And that started a 45-minute discussion as to which one was better. And at that point, this alarm bell starts ringing in the back of my head, because I'm realizing that if the designers who implemented these items, who know these systems intimately, cannot agree which item is better, there's no hope in hell that our players are going to figure this out, even with Google. And it also means that the poor console player is going to spend all this time looking at this tiny 4x3 screen trying to figure this math problem out. So we knew we needed to do something. So I thought it was really clever. You know, like a lot of times designers, we think we're clever. So like, I've seen this problem in other games, and this is how they fix it. So we add green arrows if it's good for you, down red arrows if it's not good for you, and on PC, because they like numbers, green numbers if it's good, red numbers if it's bad, right? This way, you know, players start getting to know the system. They can start making better choices, better decisions. They're kind of training wheels. So I said, well, why don't we implement this? The first backlash was, that's not on Diablo 2. Why are you adding it to Diablo 3? And I said, well, because it's Diablo 3. I mean, like, the item game has increased in complexity. You guys are doing a lot of really cool things. But I also think that 10 years have gone by, and I think players might need some training wheels to understand this. Eventually, we won that argument, but then a bigger argument came up. It was, okay, fine. If you need to have your little green arrows, we'll give you the green arrows. But then let's talk about how you're going to figure out with the green arrows. That means you're going to be making some assumptions. You're going to say, well, some affixes are more important because you're going to simplify it. You're going to sort of say it just comes down to attack, toughness, and healing at that time. Say yes. So, but then you're going to start making decisions for the player. You're going to tell them what affixes are more important than others. And like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, that could be a problem, but let's really back up for a moment here. And in a game that's about killing, any affix that allows me to kill faster and better, it's going to be the right choice over any other affix, right? But that was a conversation and a realization that took us a long time to get to around. And the thing is that we realized as we're working on Reaper of Souls that a lot of the fixes the team was trying to come up to, the way they were trying to adjust and compensate for, you know, the way D3 launched, were only addressing the symptoms. This example here, even though, you know, I think it's one of those moments where I realized that, okay, there's something deep inside the roots of this item system that is not quite right, we still weren't fixing that. We were fixing the symptoms. The cause was, as I mentioned before, was an item philosophy at launch. We had way too many items. We were dropping those items across this like item curve that was like glacier long, you know, go on for decades. Players didn't really understand the concept of rarity versus power. We committed a sin that we made all our legendaries, because we were a little strapped for time, piles of stats as opposed to build changing. And we treated all affixes equally. This is where a lot of the problems with the loot system in D3 really stem from. And Loot 2.0 is the way we try to fix it. So we wanted to drop fewer items. They had to be better. We really needed to make the legendaries what they needed to be. And this is where Loot 2.0 got us. So for those of you who don't know what Loot 2.0 is, I'm just going to go over it very quickly. The first thing we did is we had smart drops. So this quiver will not drop if you're playing a barbarian, or will drop very, 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 very rarely. We also realized, as I was mentioning before, that not all affixes are created equal. So we created two buckets. We have a primary that's really all about being more efficient at killing. And then we have a secondary one where we add a lot of cool flavor. And we try to create tension not between individual affixes, but create tension between these two groups of affixes. We really try to highlight the legendary affix, and here we really try to do things that really fundamentally break the game. And the other thing we did is we added this concept of quality. Now, one of the problems I felt that our players had, and we got this from focus test, is that when they would get an item, they didn't know how good that item was. And that's because we didn't show them the delta of the item. So now when you hold down the control key, you can actually see, hey, this item is a massive upgrade because it's in the 99th percentile. I actually feel awesome about it, and you do feel awesome. And then finally, the compare tooltips are still there, but they're at the bottom, right? Because they don't matter as much anymore because we really addressed a lot of the other big things that really was hurting Diablo 3 at launch. But even with Loot 2.0, we were not done. There was one more thing that we as a team needed to do, and that is what to do with the auction house. Now, I mentioned before, this was a grand experiment. Our intention and our motivation was really to provide players with a safe environment in which they could trade. D2 was plagued by account compromises, people getting their credit cards stolen, their accounts stolen. It's a terrible user experience. And even though it's their fault, at Blizzard, we feel it's our fault as well. So we wanted to bring that experience under the Blizzard umbrella. And we thought, well, only about 10% of players will use it. It will be OK. And again, because of how hard the game was, how stingy the loot was, what we did, we ended up just shoving everybody into the auction house. And we knew we needed to do something. But the challenge was that it became a Kobayashi Maru scenario for us. It was a lose-lose scenario, right? We couldn't, it was already there. Some players were liking it. Other players hated it, wanted it removed. It also highlighted the fact that in a loot-based game, any type of trading will fundamentally ruin that core reward loop. Even if your friend gives you this awesome item and you love him for it, all that he's done is rob you of an X number of hours of upgrades, right? So we knew we had this really big, big problem. So I remember a couple of weeks after the console version shipped, we had our monthly D3 strategy meeting with Mike Morhaime and essentially all the leadership at Blizzard. And the topic that day was, because of Hearthstone coming out, because of Heroes of the Storm coming out, we needed to do some changes to the way the back-end system of cashing out worked. So there was talk about, so what to do with the auction house and how to make these changes. And the meeting had gone on for about 20 minutes. There was a lot of business talk, a lot of legal talk, so I was off thinking about, how to slay demons and how to be an epic hero and doodling. And at that point, Mike Morhaime notices that I haven't said anything and says, well, Josh, you're awfully quiet. What do you think we should do? I'm like, busted. What are we talking about? The auction house. No, I'm kidding. And so I thought to myself, OK, I could say what I think is a safe answer, right? We can sort of say, OK, maybe we make small changes. We had a bunch of proposals in terms of how to try to limit the impact of the auction house by making items less tradable and all these things. We had all these really complex systems. And we were OK with those compromises. But then I sort of said, you know what? I should really speak what I think is the right thing to do. So I said, Mike, I think what we need to do is we need to shut down both the real money and the gold auction house. I mean, people played Diablo to slay all the things. Thank you, guys. And you know what the awesome thing was? That 20 minutes later, everyone in that room was fully on board with this idea. You know, it wasn't this big protracted fight between the business guys and the game design guys. No, everybody at Blizzard understood that the most important thing for our game is to preserve the integrity of the game experience. That a game like Diablo needs to be a game about killing monsters and slaying demons, not shopping for loot. So 3 days later, we made the announcement, and 6 months after that, the auction house was gone. And I think this was one of the key moments where we signaled, I mean, not just to our community, that was really important, but we signaled it to ourselves and the rest of Blizzard that we were going to change Diablo, and we were going to try to make it better, or we were going to die trying. So where are we now? So back then, when we shipped, it was all about efficiency. Fantasy wasn't important. Even from a team's perspective, you wouldn't often hear, what's the fantasy behind that skill? Why does that matter? Now, for Reaper of Souls and going forward, fantasy comes first, right? And one way we've expressed this is to make sure that our legendaries are game-breaking. In Diablo 3, you would shop, not play, because that was the most efficient way of getting items. When Reaper of Souls, we shut down the auction house, and we added Loot 2.0. And in Diablo 3, it was all about flip farming. It was finding the Alkaiser runs and doing them over and over and over again. And with Reaper of Souls, we made variety the most efficient way of playing the game, and that's why we added Adventure Mode. That's why Adventure Mode fundamentally changes the experience of the game. So this brings me to maybe a few takeaways that you guys can take from this talk. Again, this has been an incredible journey for the Diablo team. We learned a lot of really hard lessons. But the best thing about this team is that we never gave up on each other. We believed we could do it, and we did. And I think going forward, some of those lessons that I'm going to have scars for the rest of my life are going to be, the first one is the importance of pillars. I mean, you notice in this talk that I presented 2 sets of pillars. Focus on the fantasy, an end game for everyone, make online matter for Reaper, pick up and slay, hand-built for the console, and one couch to rule them all for console. And it's so really important that you are able to express to your team, to yourself, what the inherent DNA of your game is. These don't have to be clever catchphrases. They just need to be true, and they need to help you focus and make decisions, right? They need to help you, give you that clarity that when you're fighting fires, you know, and there's incoming fire overhead and things get crazy like they always do, you need to go to your pillars, right? You need to have a few of them, right? Not 20, no more than 5. I like 3, but that's a personal choice. The other one that I think we took a long time to learn is you got to know your fears. Okay, now every single one of us as creative people, as game designers, we make assumptions about how a game, how a system's going to work. And a lot of those assumptions are really based off our fears. What are we scared of? What don't we know? And the 2 fears that came back over and over on D3 and that we still had to keep fighting in Reaper of Souls, the first one is, that's not Diablo. That we were so afraid that we wouldn't live up to the legacy of Diablo that we kept making decisions that kind of, in the end, ended resulting in that. And it wasn't until Reaper of Souls that we really understood what the inherent sort of core of Reaper was. The other fear that we had as an item-based game was that we were afraid to be too generous. Because everybody knows that in a loot-based game that people like loot-based games because they keep coming back, right? You know, you sort of drip-feeding this awesome stuff to them, and they keep coming back, and they're having a good time. And so there was this fear of like, well, if we give them everything, they're going to stop playing. And I think the realization we made now, and the thing we firmly believe now, is that it's much better for players to get all the loot and leave your game happy, because they will come back when you have an expansion or when you do a new DLC drop or a new patch. They will come back happy. If you're stingy and you're afraid of being too generous, they're going to leave frustrated. They're going to spend 3 hours not getting an upgrade and say, like, this game just wasted my time. So we really needed to be comfortable being generous. The other one was that randomness is not replayability. I talked about this a little bit before, but this was one of those like aha moments where we realized that we sacrificed so much at the altar of randomness that we lost sight of fun. This is why we have systems where if you haven't gotten a legendary in a certain amount of time, we make sure that we slowly start nudging the system to make sure you do get a drop. We're very subtle with it, but I think it's really important that we understand that what we want is replayability. We want people to come back. Randomness can sometimes push people away. And this one's really big, especially for me, that everybody needs to keep track of what the fantasy is. And the reason this is important for me is because we constantly need to ask ourselves, why does this matter for our players? Why do they care? Why are they playing my game versus another game? And it doesn't matter what kind of game you're working on. There's always a fantasy there. You're always trying to transport your player into a different world. You're trying to immerse them. Whether it's in the mechanics or the aesthetics, it doesn't matter. You're trying to immerse them. And the only way to do that is by making sure that the fantasy is first and foremost. And the final lesson, and this is a very personal lesson, is that it's your teams that define success. When D3 shipped, the Diablo team should have been on cloud 9. The reviews are all, first of all, it's done, right? The reviews are awesome. The sales are astronomical. But I remember that day walking through the halls of the Diablo team area, and it felt like a funeral. Because we knew that we had let everybody else down. Because success for us is not about the sales or what critics saying. Success for us means our players happy playing our game. And they weren't. And what I'm most proud of that we've accomplished as a team is that we've really turned around player sentiment. People are having fun playing Diablo. They love coming back for seasons. We're now merging the console family of players with the PC family of players. And now it's a really good time to be a Diablo player. So before I close, I also want to say a really huge thanks to the Diablo team. It's an honor working with you guys. And we fought together. And I also want to take a moment to really thank Ray Gresko, who was the original production director for D3, for building that awesome team, and Jay Wilson for laying down the foundation that allowed us to make these kind of awesome changes with Reaper Souls. We wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for the work of the team. So I really want to thank them, and I want to thank you guys for listening to my talk. Thank you. So I believe we have a couple minutes for questions, so I would love to answer questions. If you have any balance questions, I will answer them afterwards. Alex?
Hi, Josh.
Hello.
So thanks for the talk. So you basically mentioned the tension between two player personas, the old guard and the new guard. So my question is, does the tension comes from the fact that we're dealing with a way bigger audience than before? Is it because now the audience has access to the internet? Is it because we're getting old? Or maybe is it because GASP? A more streamlined, more visceral experience driven by a console design can actually be of some value.
I think it was a good question. I think the answer is a bit of all of it. I think one of the things that as a team we realized, we were slow to adjust. So Diablo was not one of the first loot games. It was one of the first sort of games that really made it sort of mass market and popular. And in the 10 years between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, our players thinking about loot games really evolved. I mean, World of Warcraft, all these games really started changing the way they felt about loot. And one of the things that we didn't, as a team, fully adjust as well to that. But yeah, it's a good question. All right, I can't see people. All right, we'll go over there, because there's one.
Yep. Hey, I'm just curious how a relatively new guy on the team became game director in such a short time.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know. At any moment, I'm sure they're going to ask me to leave. You know, it's a hard question to answer. I think you should ask my team. So when the position was open, I originally wasn't going to apply for it. I was actually happy just being a lead designer again. I used to be a creative director and design director out of studios, and like I was really just happy like having my small problems to deal with. But I looked out at our team, and I really love the Diablo team. And I really wanted to sort of take care of them and keep them, you know, together and sort of moving forward. So I decided to bite the bullet and apply. And I was actually pretty shocked that they said, yes, you can do this. So even today, I'm sort of like incredibly privileged to be here. So
Thanks.
sure.
I wanted to go back to what you said about the beta test of Diablo 3 and how basically leaving up the information about the problem that you find out when you ship the game. More and more game now, you know, they try to engage the community early on and almost develop the game with the community and giving the feedback on what they want to see in the game. Do you think it's going to be something that Blizzard are going to do in the future, meaning like engaging people early on to validate what you're doing in the game in the design, or do you keep like more like doing the game and then you do a beta near the end and then you ship like the whole model?
No, I think one of the things we really shifted is we really started doing a lot of what we call PTR, or public test realms. So in fact, right now, you know, we have the public test realm for the patches coming up. Because totally, like, the more that our players are playing the game, especially the more dedicated players, the better the feedback we're getting, the earlier we're getting that feedback. And community has always been a really important thing with Blizzard. Like, BlizzCon is one extension of it, but, you know, we're really open and we try to get as much feedback as possible, even the really negative, bitter stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So when Reaper of Souls launched, and it had the dynamic difficulty where you could kind of change on the fly, I thought this was a really good way to fix the Diablo 3 very rigid difficulty. But I noticed that a lot of players, like I would talk to on Twitter, would say, I'm starting this on normal and I'm playing all the way through normal and it's too easy, but I refuse to change how I deal with that difficulty. Did you feel like you had trouble kind of retraining players to notice the difficulty was something they should change on the fly?
We did, and I still think it's not something we've nailed either. And I think it's one of those systems that, you know, if you had to redo it, we probably find more dynamic ways of doing it. So it just naturally try to scale it up or scale it down on you by paying attention to what you're doing as a player. All right, we've got 2 more minutes, so rapid fire.
Hi. So first of all, I started with Reaper of Souls on the console, and it's great. Thank you very much. I just have a question. Do you guys plan on eventually trying to unify the experience between console and PC?
So what we're trying to do is, so one of the things we're doing now is when we're releasing a patch on PC, we release it on console as well. But in order for us to really deliver that awesome experience on both platforms, we really try to treat them as separate games. And one of the challenges of unifying them is, as mentioned before, we've changed so many of the skills that even though they look like the same game, underneath the hood, they're very different games, right? So it'll be impossible to actually like unify it that way. We want to make sure that as a community, they're both evolving in the same lockstep manner.
Thanks.
Hi. Looking at these new features like gems and greater rifts, I'm just wondering why you prefer to put some new PvE features rather than trying to put some PvP on the game.
Because everybody keeps asking us when PvP is going to go in, and we've yet to figure out how to make a fun PvP experience, but we wanted to have some competitive element to it. So we felt that was something that was missing. But again, we're sort of evolving the game, right? And right now, we're still in that process of really having fun and trying to change it. Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, last question.
Okay, so there's kind of a funny internet picture of Valve meeting notes. Step 1, more hats. Step 2, everything is tradable, which is the opposite of Diablo. Fewer hats, nothing is tradable. Do you think that there's kind of a future of that whimsical player-based trading system in the Diablo franchise?
No.
No.
Who knows? But again, I really fundamentally believe that any type of trading in a loot-based game essentially short circuits what's fun about the game, which is killing. Now, if it's a game all about social trading, then that's okay. If that's the primary way of getting items, rock. But if it's, as long as it's about killing and questing, you have to be doing actions to get those items, right? So what we can, there's obviously a lot more we can talk about this, but again, thank you guys, and we're down to 10 seconds.